and the last thing I ever wanted to do was to turn into my grandfather, who also to turn into my mother. And these things kind of all kind of came to a head. Asking my mom about this one question, and it changed the way I look at what she had to go through when we were kids. So I wrote Eardrum because as I was going through stories that I could tell or think about telling, as I kind of wrote in the story, that this memory came up of a time when I got hit in the ear, and I was actually, the prompt that kind of led me to this is there was like surgeries, I think, or something. I ended up needing ear surgery after this had happened, and originally I was going to write the story from when I was a kid, but then I started to realize that there were pockets of the story that I didn't recall because it was so long ago, and I can't tell that story. So one of the rules of telling the stories, at least one of the rules I'm trying to follow, is you tell it from the perspective of where you were in that moment. It's not me telling the story from now about then. With it, so I can't say I'm a 7-year-old or I'm a 6-year-old or whatever it was, and go through the story if there's all these items missing. So I was trying to fill in some of those holes, and I reached out to my mom. And as I kind of noted, I don't often reach out and just chat. Before, right after COVID, when I wasn't driving anywhere, it was 5 days a week, work from home. Like I actually didn't reach out to her, and I realized I only call her when I was commuting. And I still kind of only call her when I'm commuting. Just there's always other things going on. I'm not the greatest son, but at the end of the day, that's just the time that I find most convenient to make phone calls. Anyway, so I reach out to her, and I'm talking to her about the story, and I kind of detail to her what I did recall, and we were going back and forth about little moments, and then she started to tell me about right after she got home, which I go to in the story, but essentially they tried to tell her that me and my brother were playing and I hit my head against the table, and she said she walked in to check on me. I was in one of the guest rooms, like a room that me and my brother would play in a lot, and she's like, okay, well, where did the hand-shaped table come from? And kind of made that crack about it, and we went back and forth about how silly that was. But that's where we ended up getting the lie that we told the doctor. And then as we were talking about the conversation with the doctor, I was like, wait, why did we lie? Like, why didn't we? I mean, again, other than the fact that he's family, and right, you technically don't like try to get your family arrested or try to get your family fined or try to get your family whatever. What else was there? Because she was a cop at the time, and she actually, I don't think that maybe then she was, but she at some point in her career worked child abuse cases. So, and that's what this was. A little backstory, I guess. Like, my grandparents were very physical. They were physical with her. They were physical with their other kids. They were physical with me and my brother. And we had this. My brother and I have had this joke. It's not really a joke. I shouldn't say a joke. We've had this conversation about how it seemed like they took out any type of punishment out on me first. And I talked to my mom about this as well, that I kind of was the brunt of whenever something needed to happen, they targeted me more than him. And the excuse that I get, the conversation that comes from that, is always, you acted more like your father than your brother did. And yeah, they didn't like my dad, that's fine. But at the same time, holy shit, like that's something that an elementary school kid or a middle school kid or fuck even a high school kid has to deal with. Of you're too much like your dad, so any chance we get to punish somebody, we're coming after you. There's actually this story where my brother and I were doing something. I was at our grandma's house, and something happened. I don't know. We dropped something. We pushed something. I don't know. We did something. We were always causing chaos. And my grandma came out of the kitchen towards where we were, and I didn't see it. My brother told me this later, but he was behind me. And as she was walking, all he did was point at me, and he is the one that did it. And she just laid into me, and I was just like, "Why the fuck am I getting my ass kicked right now?" They would hit me. They would do things. There was a time where I remember being little and little and crying about something. And I remember my grandma trying to put a pillow over me to stop me from crying. Like she didn't hold it there, like I wasn't able to breathe, but she was like basically going, "I am stopping you from crying." So, and again, I'll throw it out there, like my life is not as hard as a lot of people's was, right? Like I think many more people had it worse than me. I'm not obviously impacted by it. I'm sure there are parts of my personality that are absolutely impacted by those experiences, but I don't think back on them and have any obvious reactions to them. So I bring all that up because this story wasn't a one-off. It wasn't something that one time he did. Like this is happening all the time. And at this point, I'm in middle school. Like so, this is 7 years worth. Obviously, you take the infantry periods. I'm sure my parents or my grandparents didn't smack me around when I was a baby, but I remember as early as elementary school having things. Don't fuck preschool. I remember preschool things happening. So enough that I was 4 or 5 from that period. And so the question came up, like, why didn't we? And there was a moment of pause, and my mom basically was like, "Yeah, I probably should have. In hindsight, we probably should have just done it." And this moment was when I realized, again, I tell it in the story, but like my mom used to tell me stories about things that grandpa used to do, and I don't think that I ever connected. She was still afraid of them. Like she was in her 30s, and she was terrified of my grandfather and my grandmother. And it was only then that I had what the stories are meant to be told in a way that kind of reveals like a 5-second moment where you have a realization or a moment of enlightenment or something. And this was asking about this led to this moment where I was like, that's why we moved. That's why we got away. I remember all through middle school, we didn't go back to my grandparents. She didn't rely on them anymore. And it was, that was kind of the 5-second moment of the story. I was thinking of like, oh, like this is a tragic story. Like I had my eardrum blown out. Like I had to have surgery. I still have problems with my left ear. And this was my 5-second moment. And it came from reaching out and just asking a question, like, why did we do these? Why didn't we do these things? And we had moved right after that to a place that was, I think, about 30 minutes to an hour away. There was no other way that we were going to be dropped off at our grandparents' house during this time. And that was my 5-second moment. And like, I'm not looking for like any sympathies or anything. I got people had much worse than me, and I'm okay. I am fine. But going through the story and trying to find out more about it, it led to a 5-second moment in my 40s about something that my mother dealt with in her 30s while still being afraid of her parents. And it was sad. That's the saddest part about everything about the story to me, is she didn't know what to do. My parents divorced when we were 5, and my grandparents were not a great support system. And I'm sure mom had friends and everything, but in your early 30s, um, a single mom doesn't have a lot of support, especially back in the 80s and 90s. It was considered right. There's kind of a black mark on you for not being able to keep your marriage together. And again, I think part of that's why my grandparents hated my dad. I think they also hated him just beforehand. Other things that before the wedding, before the marriage, before the kids. And I think that my mom always told me I did the best I could. And that used to annoy the shit out of me. It used to annoy the shit out of me. She also was physical. She learned it from her father. I don't excuse that by any stretch. And that was one thing that I said I would never do is hit my kids in anger. I have had to do a spanking, but it's one of those things where it wasn't something I wanted to do. I never did it in anger, and it's never happened again. And it was a guilt moment for me that that didn't feel good. That was awful. And the last thing I ever wanted to do was to turn into my grandfather, who also to turn into my mother. And these things kind of came to a head. Asking my mom about this one question, and it changed the way I look at what she had to go through when we were kids. So that's why I wrote the story, and I hope I conveyed that.